Welcome, everyone, to the East Hampton Library's Tom Twomey series and Savoring Success, the Rise of the Hamptons Dining Scene. I'm Andrea Meyer. I'm the head of the Long Island Collection. This event originated with a conversation from our board member, Debbie Walter, who runs the library book sale and often sends book donations to the Long Island Collection. One day, she really was extremely eager for me to take a cookbook on Southampton's Herb McCarthy's Bowden Square. She said it was the only really nice place to eat when she was growing up. Debbie didn't know the place was already legendary in my family, but it prompted some conversations about how the dining scene out here has majorly transitioned in the last 40 years. Today, we are lucky enough to have some of the biggest names in the local restaurant industry join us out here for a conversation about that transformation. Our conversation is going to be moderated by New York Times restaurant news columnist Florence Fabricant, who has long-standing ties to East Hampton. And Florence got her start writing about food for the East Hampton Star. Joe Realmuto really helped put this event together, and I'm very grateful. Joe is the executive chef for the Honest Man Hospitality restaurants, including Nick and Toni's, Coche Commodore, Townline Barbecue, Rowdy Hall, and La Fondita. He's joined by Jason Weiner, who's the executive chef and co-proprietor of Almond restaurant in Bridgehampton, who also has roots at Nick and Toni's. And with them is Carol Covell. She's the general manager of the 1770 House, and she started working at restaurants in Southampton in the 1980s. Her prior roles include managing and opening restaurants for Jerry Della Femina and Ben Krapinski. And I will stop talking.
I got it. Okay. Okay, well, on paper, first of all, I want to thank the panelists for taking the time to join me in this exploration adventure, and I want to thank everybody who came out on this kind of nasty spring day, and hope that we'll make it worth your while. On paper, what we will be discussing, because the lecture series has its eye on history, is how the Hamptons has evolved into a premier culinary destination. Really? Like maybe an 8-year-old around exit 60 heading east would ask, are we there yet? And so I'd like the panelists to address that question briefly. Do you think this is a premier culinary destination? Why don't you start in, Joe?
Well, I think we've come a long, long way in the last 32 years that I'm out here and in the restaurant business out here. When I first started out here, there were some good restaurants, but not a lot of them. And I think now we have a better selection of restaurants, better quality of chefs coming out. People are actually coming out here to live and to work, not necessarily circling around the same old locals that were just going from one restaurant to another. That, you know, that's what they came up in the business.
Cal?
Yep, I agree with Joe that it's better. I don't know that it's a culinary destination. Like New York City or San Francisco or Napa. I think we're getting there. I think it would be great if it was a wine and a food destination at the same time, like Napa. So I think we're getting there, and people like Jean-Georges coming to Topping Rose House, that's all a good sign of what's to come.
And Jason?
First of all, thank you guys for coming, but Florence, I mean, I don't know if you guys know, in our business, Florence Fabricant is known as FloFab, and everyone knows exactly who you're talking about. She is, literally a legend in our business, and so totally psyched to be sharing a stage with you, Florence. Appreciate you doing this with us. I don't know. I mean, culinary destination, I think you kind of have to read the room. People are out here not necessarily for a dining experience, because they're generally either living and working out here, being normal people, or they're out here to chill and relax, and they don't need a sort of multi-course sort of elevated thing. So we've always, at Almond, have always just tried to do something sort of true and real and straightforward and kind of rooted in what goes on in this community anyway. So these are a little bit loaded terms, but I think we do a pretty good job out here. I mean, there's a long history of different kinds of places, and of course there's interlopers and people. I mean, we've been out here for 25 years, and some people still consider us interlopers. But so yeah, I mean, I think some of these are loaded terms, but I think we've come a long way, like Joe said.
I think to call this a premier culinary destination, I think you first have to take into account that it's a seasonal situation here for a great deal of the year, and it is a vacation area. It is not a year-round San Francisco or Napa, for example. It's more, you would compare it more to maybe Nantucket or Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard or even parts of Florida. It does depend on vacation, and people, I think, go to an area not necessarily because of the food. I think if the food is great, that's a bonus. And in terms of the evolution, you have to go back to the 1960s when you had Henri Soulet at the Hedges, when you had Michael Field at Maidstone, Tom Cowman, when a little bit later Star Boggs in West Hampton getting started. I remember those days, and I remember, does anybody in the audience remember a place called Squires in East Hampton? To me, Squires was unique because of their wines. The food was good. It was up on the highway, which is now, it's like across from Red Horse, that building. Yeah, no, not Cove Hollow, the other one. That was the Japanese, it was Kasaki last summer, and I forget what it is, some begins with a Z. Anyhow, it was that building, and Squires had the most incredible wine list, particularly Burgundies from the Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. I remember drinking Grands Echezeaux at Squires, even though the floor of the place was, I think, AstroTurf, but never mind.
I was going to ask, what was the vibe service-wise? What was?
I mean, it was
the decor.
It was. I don't remember much about the decor. At one time, they had a pastry chef who never tasted her food, and there was once an incident where she had used salt instead of sugar in some dessert. It was it was about the
We've
wines.
all done it. It's not.
But
well, yeah.
the fact is that over the years, there have been great chefs here. There have been very good restaurants that were, I would say, up to the standards of their era. A place like Chez Labatt, where you could rely on the roast leg of lamb with white beans. The John Duck, which was really a local place, but did a great job because they concentrated on the duck. And throughout the whole period, you have seafood places, mainly in Montauk, but also there's Bostwick's. But the seafood at Gossman's and so forth, and the Clam Bar, and places like that, I mean, they have maintained throughout. And at the same time, I want the panelists to address the fact that in terms of very cuisines, the options, Asian cuisines, even to some extent Italian beyond pizza, Spanish, those kinds of foods seem to be in very short supply. How do you explain that? How can this be a culinary destination and be kind of have such a narrow palate?
Can I take this for a second? Okay, so I was just going to say that I'm nervous, so bear with me, everybody.
Hold the mic closer.
I do think that there is a lack of diversity. I suspect it probably has to do with the population in the winter, that maybe they're not sustainable. I mean, there's even a lack of seafood restaurants. You mentioned Asian and other types, but there's really not even. Sometimes people ask me in East Hampton, where do I go for seafood? And I can come up with a couple of places, but you'd think there'd be a long list. We all serve seafood, but which restaurants are seafood restaurants?
Well, there are very few, relatively few seafood-centric
There are.
restaurants.
Yeah.
I also think, to run a successful, restaurant, it needs to be authentic. We kind of saw that with Way Fun. Kevin Penner opened up Way Fun, and I thought it was good, but he caught a lot of criticism because he was a white boy, per se. So I mean, we have La Fondita and Coche Comedor, which are both Mexican, but we're blessed to have a good Mexican community here. That both of my chefs and my staff there are able to execute the dishes. And actually, when we opened up La Fondita and Coche, I was able to write all the menus, write the recipes. But then the chefs, when we were testing them, I like to use the term degringonize them. They actually twisted them around and made them more authentic. So I think that's a hard thing. We don't have a lot of Indian people living out here. We don't have a lot of Asian people living out here to actually execute those dishes.
Well, there are Asian touches on menus. In terms of Mexican, I think the term authentic is kind of out the window as far as I see it. I mean, you even go into Korean restaurants in Manhattan, and there are no Korean restaurants out here, which is surprising because every third restaurant opening lately is Korean or a sushi bar. But, and you get a mishmash. What is authentic anymore?
I think a lot, I mean, when you're talking about the quote-unquote sort of ethnic cuisines, I mean, a lot of it comes down to economics and and the rents that happen out here. I mean, a lot of the best places are in Jackson Heights or Indian restaurants on 6th Street in the East Village. We don't have those. There isn't the level of. There's not enough variability as far as different kinds of restaurant spots out here. So you're locked into a certain kind of rent that you might not be able to support. Now, of course, when you're talking about high end, and you talk about Korean, there's sort of two kinds of Korean restaurants, right? There's sort of street food kind of vibe, but then there's also places like Attaboy, which are elevated. And again, I think that kind of place, like I was saying earlier, wouldn't really have a market out of here because you're talking about something that's more experiential, and I don't feel like people are out here for something experiential.
Well, also, when you talk about Korean, don't forget the steakhouse barbecue formula.
Yeah, and there are places like that, and actually near Palm Beach, there's a couple of places like that kind of fit that bill. And you're also talking about, having to, you're talking about specialized things, and we'll talk about this maybe later, but the variability in labor out here, and in the city you can draw from all neighborhoods to Brent. All I have to do is get on a train to come to you. Here we're kind of locked into people who live, basically east of the canal. So there's only a certain amount of people that are sort of have experience with that kind of cuisine. We can talk about authentic or not authentic. I think you're right. Cultural appropriation, is sort of not so bad anymore. I mean, obviously we have, if anyone's come to our restaurant, we dabble in all kinds of things, but it's really kind of based on the ingredients first and the provenance of the actual cuisine is second. We lead with the ingredients. I mean, this is, before people came out here we joke around, before people came out here to as a place to people to honk their horns on the weekend. In the summer, we were a farming and fishing community, and then that's still, I think, the basis of a lot of the food that happens out here. At least I hope it is.
Yeah, let's talk about the whole seasonality and the challenges of, I mean, you all have restaurants that are open year-round. There are restaurants that are not. And what about finding employees? What about the supply chain? All of those issues. How do you cope off-season? in terms of your clientele, filling the room, prices you charge, and so forth, in the off-season versus the height of the season in the summer when, you turn people away.
You can charge more, a little bit more in the summer. It's just the law of supply and demand. But the staffing situation it's brutal in the summer. It's just as hard in the winter. As Jason said, they're coming mostly from east of the canal. If they're coming west of it, they don't want to be in the traffic. And if they're east of it, they can't afford to live out here. So it's really, really hard. I've had somebody once coming for a job interview, and they called me and said, "I'm so sorry I'm running late. I had no idea the traffic would be like this." And I said, "Oh, well, that's every day." And they said, "Every day?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "You know what? I'm going to turn around and no thank you." And that goes on. It's just too much traffic, or they can't afford to live here, so the labor force is difficult. But we get it. We manage, and we do a good job. We do the best job we can, but it's hard finding people with the shortage of housing.
That's also the driving force about pricing in the restaurants. People just think, price on a menu is because the cost of goods. But that's not necessarily it. We look at the whole picture. Our labor, because of the housing market out here, if you look at what we're paying dishwashers and line cooks out here as opposed to Mid-Island or the city, we're 2/3 more. We're paying
Everybody
a lot
wants
more.
a lot of money to show up.
Yeah, and it's understandable because what it costs them to live out here. I mean, what happened during COVID, the housing market out here really kind of affected our industry tremendously. The supply chain has gotten really tough as well.
I mean, I think the short answer, we're talking about the short answer is we do a $39 price fix for 10 months out of the year so we can charge $55 for a scallop for those other 2 months. Or we charge $55 for a scallop for those 2 months so we can give the locals a $39 price fix the other 10 months. So depending on how you look at it.
Which comes first?
Yeah, I mean, those kinds of variations kind of go with the territory.
There's always the seasonal thing, the resort community. There's always the inherent tension of wanting to being part of the community, and not wanting to kind of foster resentment on either side of the coin. We have to be all things to all people, but these are probably things that are. It's whatever. We can complain all we want. Every business has its own niche challenges, and we do this because we love to do it, and we like people, and we like making people happy. And after 25 years, we've had people, and Joe can, you guys have been out here longer than I have, but we have people who came into our restaurant as children, who then ended up working as a hostess 16 years later, and now come in with their children. So. When you're talking about things like that, it's obviously beyond $39 price fix and $55 scallops.
Yeah, over the years, I've always had people come say to me, so-and-so restaurant is really, really good, but it's so expensive for out here. And I say to them, think about it. Most of the restaurants are only making money 4 months a year. Most of the restaurants have to deal with some of the challenges that do not exist in an urban area, like finding housing for employees or getting supplies through the traffic because they can't rely on train or trucks or so forth to be on time. And I think we're fortunate that one of the evolutions I've seen, and we can talk about that too, is that the local restaurants are relying to a much greater extent on local products. Because when I first started coming out here, not only the reason I started writing for the Star is because it would drive me nuts to see people buying lettuce in the A&P that's wrapped in cellophane and shipped from California, when they can go down the street and their neighbor's car table is loaded with homegrown lettuces and tomatoes, and you put money in the jar. And people were not as aware of that, and not the restaurants either. Those were the days when a good restaurant was one that would serve you raspberries in December because they were out of season and rare. Today, a good restaurant is one that doesn't.
Right, yeah.
So talk about the kind of seasonality and how you've seen the products evolve and how that's affected your menu, stuff you might be growing yourself, and whether there's an appreciation of that. Because I was at a dinner in New York recently, a chef was doing a new spring menu, and on his spring menu was red snapper. And I said to the manager, why red snapper? I never eat red snapper unless it's in Florida or in the South, because I don't think it travels well, and there are so many other options. So why would a New York chef serve red snapper? I never could understand that. But here,
I guarantee, I guarantee that manager came right into the kitchen sweating. It's like, FloFab is out there asking why we have red snapper on the menu.
What did they say to you?
well, I hope so.
What was the response?
What?
What was the response?
He accepted that. Yeah, absolutely. You know, okay, it's fine to throw some ramps on the menu or peas, but think about really what is seasonal. So tell me, you've been here decades, and you've seen the availability, dock to dish and so forth, change and increase, and also you have farmers who 30 years ago didn't know what arugula was, and now they're growing it right and left. Sometimes not the right kind of arugula, but never mind. How has what's grown and harvested from the sea now evolved in terms of your menus? Let's talk about that.
I'll start with the appreciation part. You know, when I first started my career, one of the best restaurants I worked for was the River Cafe, and it was a tough kitchen to work in. But I came in and I was in charge of one thing. I'd come in and do that one job. I never saw any products walk in the back door. I never butchered anything. I never prepared the sauces and the stocks. There was people that did individual things. I would walk in. I'd grab my carrots and my lettuce from a box, and I had no connection. My first year that I worked at Nick and Toni's, you know, we had a small garden that was tended by Quail Hill. I was able to walk out in the yard, pick herbs before service. We had local fishermen walking in the back door with striped bass and tuna. So the appreciation, and then I went back to the city after that summer was over and worked for Be Our Guest, and it was that same situation. I would just go into work, and it was just that grind of just cooking and cooking and cooking. There was no connection to the food. So I decided to come out to the Hamptons one more summer and thought I would never leave again, that I would go back to the city after that summer and just start my career and just stay in the city. And I came out here for that next year, and we were, you know, butchering whole animals. I was actually doing all the butchering of all the fish. Dale and Betty were coming to the back door with vegetables and tomatoes, and Quail Hill was sending over stuff. And, you know, these are products that never actually touch a refrigerator, which makes it so much better. When you're serving tomatoes in the summer that never go into a refrigerator, it's the world of difference. You know, none of those sugars turn to starch. You don't get that mealiness. So it's beautiful. And, you know, the local fish out here, you know, he's talking about red snapper. It drives me nuts when I go into a restaurant, I see bronzino on a menu.
Oh.
Like, why do we have to have a fish travel 1,700 miles?
Well, they're raising them in Connecticut. And now I don't know how much we get from the Connecticut seafood farms.
But why not get black sea bass, tuna, swordfish, tilefish, monkfish, right here from our own backyard? You know,
Which are
and
so delicious.
You know, I have to tell
too.
you, the LVIS cookbook that came out, what, now it was 3-4 years ago?
More than that, was before COVID.
Right. Is a salmon-free cookbook. Salmon, Chilean sea bass. I mean, I would accept the existence of steelhead on a menu out here. It's being raised in the Hudson Valley. I'll go that far, and in many cases, it's better than salmon. But I am so tired of seeing salmon everywhere because
But that's also tricky because, you know, people are looking for that familiar food and they like it and they ask for
well,
it.
that's how is what you put on your menu and what sells driven by consumer taste.
Yeah, well, but that's part of our, you know, we're not here to lecture our customers or to teach our customers, but it is part of our responsibility as chefs to kind of steer people in the right direction, for sure. And I mean, as far as we're concerned at Almond, we don't write menus and then go get the food. We get the food and then write the menu based on what's in front of us. We have farmers. We deal with many farmers out here. Maybe, you know, we've have been blessed with making relationships with 15 or 20 local beekeepers and oyster growers and cheese makers and of course baymen and scallop men and fishermen and obviously farmers. Every year, like, anything you wanted me to grow for you, catch for you this year, I was like, no, you tell me, you give me the list, and then I'll come up with the menu from there. And, you know, talking about, there's obviously a bunch of months that's not in the growing season, about 6 months. And in September, all we're doing is preserving and canning things so we can kind of stretch things out. Right now, we have September tomatoes on the menu at the restaurant because we got about, I don't know, 2,000 pounds of tomatoes from Pike at the end of the year. In fact, we're pulling leeks out of the so Pike, who we were our first wholesale customer. In fact, when I went to Jim Pike, he's his own kind of guy. We went to Jim Pike and said, "I want to buy wholesale from you." He didn't know. I had to explain what I was talking about. So anyway, but they close October, right around Halloween every year. But there's a big row of leeks that's always there that kind of keeps growing through the winter, and leeks kind of hold up through the winter. Right now, I'm still pulling leeks out of the ground on the way to work, and just keeping a tally. So when they open up in June, I took about 350 leeks, Jim, and he charges me 50 cents a leek instead of $1 because that was sunk cost for him anyway.
How do the prices compare for local stuff or stuff you could get from Chef's Warehouse or Baldor or wherever?
Same or cheaper. And if I run out of carrots on a Saturday night, all I have to do is text Marilee Foster and tell her I need carrots. She'll put them in the back, and I'll send a busboy to get the carrots and bring it back to me. The annoying thing is you have to text or call or email about 12 different people instead of a broadline producer where it's just a one-shot deal. But that's the only thing that's different.
Well, you also have to know what they have available. That's the other thing. You have to constantly say, "Hey, what do you have today?"
Right. That's what that goes to the multiple interface thing, like having to look at 15 lists instead of like one Baldor list.
Well, do you get calls, for example, from farmers or farm stand owners who will say to you, "Hey, we got a bunch of garlic scapes. Do you want them?" Is there that kind of interchange, or
Absolutely.
From fishermen saying, "We've got whelks. Do you want the whelks?"
Yeah, that's happening all the time. Especially with the fishermen. Hey. It's usually last minute, and I hate to say, a lot of times it's on a Monday because they've been fishing. They went fishing over the weekend. Now they have coolers full of stuff, and they're like, "All right, we have all this stuff available." It's like, you need to kind of change your schedule because we need that fish on Thursday to get us through the weekend.
This happens a couple of times a year. I get a text from Joe. It's like, "I got Chris in Westlake. He's got 250-pound tuna. I only need half a tuna. Take the other half a tuna." I was like, yeah, of course, whatever. So then we'll have to hem and haw about who's going to go get it. Usually it's Joe. He's that much closer. And then we split the tuna. And then I get around to Venmoing Joe about 6 months later.
I actually think you still owe me.
That's an issue. Yeah. Well, let's.
I think that Jason's point, said you were the Pike's first customer for wholesale. That was never the case back in the day. I mean, it was only a Baldor or Chef's Warehouse, Dairyland. And now the farmers are on board, and it's great. And they do, call you and tell you what they have. Chef Rozzi at 1770 House does the same thing, preserving things over the winter. So in the springtime, we can have those delicious flavors again. Yeah, but it never used to be the case that the farmers were available for us doing the wholesale.
Let's talk about lobster. Lobster has always been, when you talk about a premier culinary destination, lobster has always been a premier culinary ingredient. And there have been such variations. My recollection is when I started dining out here there were local lobsters. There are no longer local lobsters, and people may think the lobsters are local. They ain't. What about the price of lobsters and consumer response and what you do with them? Can you talk about that?
Well, I look at lobster kind of like the bay scallops. They're
That's
just
another one.
everybody wants them, but not everybody wants to pay for them. And the price of lobster and scallops are through the roof. And I don't know if it's just me. I feel guilty charging $48 for a lobster roll.
Everybody wants a lobster roll.
You could serve it for $38, but it becomes a loss leader, and it's not what we're in the business to do, is to lose money on a dish. People are like, well, it's just lobster salad. Well, that lobster meat is really expensive, same as bay scallops.
I think, I think that's a whole other conversation. This challenges and the struggles that our local fishermen kind of go through, and there's so much to that. I mean, the bay scallop thing is a real heartbreaker because when I first got out here, they weren't around, and then there was like 10 or 12 years there where they were delicious and they were actually affordable, and it was great. And then the past 4 or 5 years, it's been really bad. And I don't know if it's environmental. I'm not rich. It's a little bit above my pay grade, but it's something. I mean, they went from being plentiful to not so much. But I do think it might be cyclical. I don't know.
Is there a fish that you've tried to put on your menu that you couldn't sell?
Rouget. That was back when I first started out here.
Yeah, but that's so
I don't think.
local.
No, all the local seafood actually sells really, really well.
Whiting?
Tilefish. Yeah, if you fry it, yeah, absolutely.
Blackfish?
Blackfish, beautiful. It's such a beautiful fish. Yeah, it sells really well. Monkfish.
Now, what was the one that Sean was trying to get us? The little guys, the croaker fish. What are they called?
The blowfish.
Not blowfish. There was something that was it was a pain in the neck to clean.
Butterfish.
No, not but those are good. I don't know. It'll come to me. But anyway, I think there are something. I don't think blackfish. I mean, the nice thing about especially the locals out here, they're educated about seafood.
Yeah.
They know that blackfish are down the bottom of the sea eating shrimp all day, so they taste like shrimp and they cost a quarter of the price.
And they're wonderful in the stews.
Oh, so good. So they hold up so well. For sure, and monk, obviously. I think with that, we've been able to not have salmon on the menu forever. We get steelhead trout in, and we treat it like salmon, and we tell people it's just like salmon, which it is, but better.
It's pretty much the same family.
Pretty much the same thing. But I think the locals are pretty clued in to what's going on out here fish-wise.
I think the bluefish is probably the hardest sell. Porgy's actually made a pretty good
Porgy
comeback
is
for a
another
while.
one.
We changed the name from Porgy's to Montauk Sea Bream, and all of a sudden everybody started liking them. It's like, wow.
Porgy is the same as imported orata. The difference is the porgy here are much smaller.
But if you read Latin, it's the same genus, it's the same species.
Yeah, it's a sea bream. But people don't realize that. And when you call it porgy, ooh. But it's, I think it has evolved because when I can recall years ago when there were a lot of local fish. I mean, I remember monkfish, nobody knew what that was. And it was only when people started coming back from trips to Europe and had Lot in France that they understood monkfish. And it's made a huge difference. There is a bigger appreciation.
A really nice fish is actually sand shark. I actually did a piece with Dr. Dish where they were bringing in, when we first started with Dr. Dish, the program was set up that we had a weekly allotment.
Everybody know what Dr. Dish is?
So Dr. Dish was started in Montauk by a group of, one gentleman organized a bunch of local fishermen out here and decided to take the fish directly from them and bring it directly to the restaurant within 24 hours.
And they even service Manhattan restaurants.
They do now, yes. Yeah. Now it's actually grown quite large. And what they would tell us what we were getting the day of. And the deal was we get 100 pounds of fish, we get 50 pounds of bycatch, which could be butterfish, calamari, whiting, things that people didn't necessarily want. And then you'd get a really nice catch like striped bass, monkfish, tilefish, tuna. So we'd have to actually figure out day of how to use these products. The program has changed a little bit because now they have so many more fishermen, and they'll say, okay, what do you want? We'll say, okay, what do you have? And they'll say, we have monkfish, we have tilefish, we have butterfish, we have calamari, and we could actually just buy it what we want. We're not allotted, we don't have to take the whole 100 pounds.
And you're also kind of getting the middleman out of the equation, where it's essentially going right. It's a group of fishermen that are running this thing, so it's going right from. So often, what happens is fishermen have a license they don't have a license to sell wholesale. They can sell to brokers, and then the brokers sell it to the restaurant. But this kind of cuts that out. They have the license to sell wholesale and also the license to catch.
And also, a lot of the brokers would buy hundreds or thousands of pounds of fish, take it from Montauk, bring it to the Fulton Street Market, sell it there. The buyers from here would go in, buy that same product, and bring it back out here. So they kind of cut all that out, which is really, really nice. And a big portion, instead of them paying $2.50 for a striped bass, and then the broker selling it, and then at the end of the day, us paying $10 a pound, we pay $10 a pound directly to the fishermen.
Yeah.
There is a whole thing with Gosman's controlling the ice in Montauk. All the ice in Montauk is controlled by Gosman's. It's produced by Gosman's. So Dr. Dis does have to deal with Gosman's as far as getting the ice. It's a racket.
You have to be careful with the word ice in the restaurant business.
In terms of produce, do you find that you can request that farmers grow certain things for you? And is there anything you can't get that you wish you could?
I sit with my farmers because we have probably a quarter-acre farm behind the restaurant that we have farmers that work for us and chickens. So we sit with them, and we also sit with Ian. I also talk with Leighton over at Quail Hill, and we talk about the things that we're buying from them. They ask us if we want something else, and we'll ask for things that they don't traditionally grow, whether it's like things like Trevisano or different types of greens or beans, and they will actually grow it for us. And it's a lot more accessible now. People like Balsam Farm and Quail Hill Farm and Amber Waves, they'll send out lists to us now, which makes it a lot easier than it was back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, there obviously where the nice thing is, and this is kind of leads us to what you asked about why there's so much of a certain kind of cuisine or less of other cuisines. We are kind of in an area that a lot of what's growing here is sort of the Mediterranean kind of palette of fruit and vegetables. So we're not, obviously you can't grow citrus here. They've never really been able to get their shit together with artichokes. Anybody has, but whatever. But for generally all that Mediterranean stuff, whether you're talking about the 5 ratatouille ingredients, eggplant, zucchini, tomato, fennel, and onion, those are all really on point. I mean, the Marilee Foster, I did a similar talk like this with Marilee Foster last week, and she kept talking about Bridgehampton loam. The soil out here is very specific and known to be really extra special. And the farmers, they often tell me that they try to just stay out of the way of what's going on in the soil and let the soil kind of do what it needs to do. And we, at least me as a chef, I try to stay out of the way of the ingredients and not screw it up and just try to do as little as possible and a little bit of a whimsical push here and there. But and I'm not going to ask anyone to grow something that they don't think that's going to work out for them. Like I said, they ask me these questions, and sometimes I say, yeah, grow fava beans for me this year. And I'm like, okay, we'll do that. But I'll often just let them dictate what's going to be on the menu, and they grow what they feel like is going to work out best in their environment, because they know better than I do.
Do you see the effects of climate change in what you can obtain and what you can cook with, and
Mahi season
when?
is a lot. The mahi season is a lot longer, and it's great. The mahi is great. And we've never had. We hardly. There was used to be like a month we had mahi up here. Now it's more like 4 or 5 months. And again, Marilee Foster, she was telling me that the springs are actually damper and cooler and a little later. So and the falls are a little hotter and longer. So asparagus, which used to be available to us in May, and rhubarb and strawberries also, now it's like the first week of June. But things go further on the other end.
Well, I was going to say that too. Everybody kind of sees you get a 65-degree day, and they're like, "Oh, when are you going to change your menu? When are you going to get some spring things on your menu?" The spring product doesn't really hit
Very
until,
late.
Until,
Yeah.
June.
I think last year we didn't have strawberries till July.
And that kind of affects what we're doing out here. What we're trying to do. Rather than serving a hearty dish and something spring-like, we're still serving heartier dishes because of the product that we have to get.
Somebody asked me to bring up the fact of the possible increase in the price of wines that are imported, wines and spirits that might be imported. And do you see, first of all, wine prices have been up generally. It's hard to see a bottle of wine on a wine list for less than $50. It's hard to see a glass of wine down to 10 when it's not happy hour. And the prices have been inching up without any kind of discussion of tariffs. At the same time, in your backyard, you have local wines being made. Why aren't there more? And do you think on your wine list, because I've always seen a paucity of them, and do you think with the possible price increase that may be a boost for the local wine industry? Is it hard to get people to order local wines?
I don't think so. We have people staying at the hotel that are here to check out the Hamptons, whether it be for the beach or the restaurants, and to try the local farm stands and the wines. And as I said in the beginning, it would be great if this could become more of a wine and food destination. I was looking at the Della Femina New York Times review before I came here today, and I saw that we, back then, I think that was 1990 something, that the Joanne Starkey talked about the wines being, some of them were, on $20 and below, and I was like, wow, that's not the case anymore, and the prices are so high, and the tariffs will affect, the prices of wine. So yeah, we got to look in our backyard. We've got Roman Roth doing wonderful things at Wolfer, and Christopher Tracy at Channing Daughters. I mean, they deserve a shout out, and their wineries should be visited, and their wines should be tasted. They should be on our tables on the holidays or every day.
I think people expect somehow, they have this mentality that the local wines should be much cheaper. It's not cheaper. The only thing that you save on with the local wines is transportation, perhaps. But aside from that, it's not cheaper to make wine here than it is in Napa or Burgundy, because the kinds of costs that a winemaker, the cost of growing your grapes and cultivating them, and the personnel, and on and on and on, are comparable. As I say, the only thing you're going to save on is transportation, perhaps, and maybe a tax here and there. But why do you think there's such consumer resistance to the local wines?
I think some of it has to do with, I think there are certain boxes that need to be checked that, we have a long, wonderful relationship with Channing Daughters and with Kareem at Pomanac, and we feature them both heavily on our menu. But I think there are some, and I don't buy the wine. My partner Eric is here; he could probably speak to this more. But I think there are a lot of certain kinds of wines that just aren't being produced out here. Some,
like what?
I don't know, Eric.
I look at what I see in the inventories of wineries like Channing Daughters, for example, and some of the North Fork wineries, and they're growing stuff like Albarino and Tempranillo and grapes that are not certain. Well, there's no real native grape to this region unless you want to talk about French hybrids, which are now coming into a little bit of prominence in New York State and Canada. But basically, they can try anything here. And there's now an organization that has named the Cabernet Franc the New York State signature red. It may be valid, it might not be, but I think that there's a tremendous bias in terms of wine. I know people who only drink Bordeaux, and really? What are you missing? So I think with a lot of things, there's a real challenge at work in order to educate, and I think the only way you sell wine is really one-on-one, good sommelier, why don't you try this? Let me pour you a little bit and give it a try and see if you like it. And if you like it, buy a glass or a bottle or whatever. Do you find that it's a struggle?
Well, I think we're going to have to pivot. We're going to have to continue to pivot on what we do, especially if prices start going up. We can't just keep passing it on to the consumers. We can't absorb it. We're not in the business just to be in business to give things away, but people are going to get tired of paying these high prices. So we're going to have to pivot and start figuring out ways to keep our prices down and still give a good quality product. And it might be, really looking at more local, whether it's wineries, spirits. The spirits in New York have just exploded, and they're putting out some really good quality stuff.
Even Wolfer, I think they're making gin.
Gins, there's vermouths, there's vodkas, there's jus.
And that brings up cocktails. Now, when I first started coming out here, and I couldn't have been more than 15, I remember sitting on Herb McCarthy's lap at Bowdoin Square and having him pour me a creme de menthe frap. It was probably the last time I drank that green stuff. It was such a turnoff. But the whole cocktail scene has exploded. Is that something you're seeing? Do you see that there's a response for the concocted cocktail rather than the classic? And is that putting financial burden on personnel, on time? And, what about the cocktail scene? Because it's getting bigger and bigger.
It's an interesting question because, yes, there is labor involved in some of the cocktails. Espresso martinis or some of them with botanicals and all. So there is, you might be waiting an extra minute for your drink, but it will be delicious when you get it. But yeah, it is time consuming and very popular. Definitely competing with wine at the table now. It's not just starting with a cocktail and going to wine, it's cocktails throughout.
Really?
Sometimes, yeah, it's very, very popular, the cocktails right now.
What cocktails?
Have to keep order. It's definitely the espresso martini. We still see the Cosmo is hanging in there. Yeah, I know. You have to have lots of martini glasses on hand and shakers.
And people are calling their alcohol a lot more now. They're very brand specific. Where before somebody would just come in and say, "I'll have a gin and tonic." Now it's I want this gin, I want this tonic. Tonic is not coming out of a gun anymore. We're using these really nice bottles. Even the sodas. In all of our restaurants, we don't have soda guns. We're using Mexican Coke because of the sugar. Instead of corn syrup, so we're kind of cognizant of that stuff, but that stuff costs money as well. Even at La Fondita, our agua frescas, everything we're pressing fresh. The lime juice for the limon. We're not using pasteurized frozen lime juice. The watermelon, the same thing. We're not using purees. We're squeezing everything fresh.
We're lucky enough to have, Sagaponic Distillery, which is a mile and a half from our restaurant, again, Marilee Foster, I know I keep talking about her, but she's basically my hero. I mean, her potatoes, they're
They're
she
doing
grows the potatoes.
incredible
It's
stuff.
all happening right there. So it's
How many have been to the Sagaponic Distillery? Yeah, they're really doing imaginative and
yeah, and we
really
try and again
great
with
spirits.
our cocktail program, just like just at least with us, we're really hesitant to overgild any lilies. If we're getting a great thing, we try not to do too much to it. That's us, and I think in the city, people maybe expect something again a little more experiential, but that's not really where we live, at least at Almond.
What about the prices of cocktails?
Well, you can charge out the ass because they're not really generally listed on the menu. I mean, bottled water, that's where we're making all our money, honestly. Bottled water, $22 cocktails, I mean, you know.
So we have a couple more minutes before we open to questions. So going forward, what do you see happening this summer, and what do you see in the future that may or may not affect your business and where it's going? Give me a little sum up.
Well, for me, it's definitely the housing market out here. I mean, that's just going to affect everything. You know, rents are really high, so, you know, the rental market is weak. Labor is really high, so, you know, we're putting that cost on to the consumers, which keeps people away. People might be more apt to go into the farm stand and buying products and then going home and cooking themselves rather than going to restaurants. So I think the housing market out here is our biggest struggle, and it affects our business the most.
I have to agree. It's all about the staffing and housing and the labor. A lot of places have staff housing. Some places come from Florida and open a place, or New York City, and they can transfer staff back and forth because they have a house, staff housing. I don't know if anybody here has staff housing. We don't, so it makes it very, very difficult.
And it's going to be worse this summer, do you think?
I think so. The traffic is, I mean, every single year we all say this is the worst year of traffic, right? I've never seen it like this. Every year we say it, but it was really bad last year.
Yeah.
Immigrant labor, and this is not a controversial thought, but immigrant labor is what make all restaurants, every restaurant run.
True.
I mean, it's an easy blanket statement. It's just the case, and people are obviously a little scared. And we've seen a little evidence and anecdotal of people, quote, self-deporting, and less people coming in. I think that's going to be a problem for us. We haven't felt it yet, but I think that's going to have to be a problem this year. I mean, I think you guys can talk to this too. We're fortunate after so many years to have been tapped into a network. I mean, I have people who've worked for us for 15, 18 years, and they obviously that's a kind of an in-house network for us to reach into to hire new staff, and you do have to ramp up in the summer. But I feel like there's a lot of fear out there, and I think it's going to probably affect our labor pool. I think that the housing thing is always an issue, and we've actually experimented. We sometimes do have staff housing. Every year we kind of have to kind of shuffle it around and figure it out. But I think the current administration and the whole thing with ICE is going to be a big issue this year.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. In terms of the clientele and what you're putting on your menus, do you see some kind of difference going forward, or same old, same old?
Well, I kind of think it's changed over the life that I've been out here. You know, people, have more sophisticated palates. You know, they have access to, social media where it's all full of food and cocktails and people telling you where you should eat and what you should eat. So yeah, every year it gets tougher and tougher. And I think social media is probably one of the downfalls of our society.
Well, that's maybe a plus and maybe not. I mean, what percentage of your customers take pictures of their food?
A lot.
Well, that's your social media. Look what I just ate.
And back in the day, you just were worried about the New York Times and Newsday's reviews. When you opened a restaurant, it was all about that. Like, does anybody know what their alias is? Does anybody know what they look like? And you were just so nervous every single day. Now, it's, the customer's point of view can make or break you because they're posting it on social media, which people like
You
to
have
see.
customers who come in and ask for specific dishes because they've seen it on Instagram and stuff like that?
Absolutely, yes.
Really?
And, yeah, totally, yes.
I think, I actually think for whatever reason maybe me and Eric just figured out, we cracked the code or something, but I feel like very, very, very few of our customers are assholes. They're generally not. I don't know how we did it, but I feel like, because I always hear about customers being jerks, but I don't really get that much. Maybe I don't know, I'm in the kitchen hiding. Maybe Eric has a different.
Okay, well, I think we can open this to questions. We have a mic that will go around, and please speak right into the mic so we can hear the questions.
Start over here.
Hi. Everybody now is aware of pesticides and things like that. Do your customers care if your produce is organic? Because I notice most of the farms out here do spray. They're not organic. So do you get any questions like that, or doesn't anybody care as long as it tastes good?
I think that it's important to note it if it is organic. We do like to tell people that it is. I don't think anybody's ever really specifically asked about it, to be honest with you.
For us, it's more about what we care about, and I don't want to eat food that's been sprayed or has been treated in any specific way, so I try to align myself with whether it's farmers or purveyors that are doing the right thing, and it starts with us, and a lot of our customers know what we're doing is the right thing.
There are a couple in the back.
Hi, thank you. I got a question about duck. It seems like there are fewer, if any, duck farms out here, and I want to know how that's affecting the menus you have, and as a consumer, having duck. I've read a lot about that.
Well, there was the big duck farm that had to do away with hundreds of thousands of their birds because of bird flu. And yes, there used to be more duck farms. I don't know. Where do you get your ducks from?
Well, yeah, so Crescent Farm had to cull their whole flock. That was the
Right.
last duck farm in Long Island. There used to be hundreds. So now we're actually sourcing we're kind of, Almond is a duck family. We like duck. So we're currently, it's coming from a farm in Pennsylvania, which is local-ish, but our relationship with Crescent Farm goes back many, many years, and we're all kind of pulling for them. And if you see it around back on, we're talking about probably 4 or 5 months at the earliest that they'll be back online. But if you do see it around, you should definitely support them by buying the product. But right now, they're completely offline. They lost the whole flock.
Isn't there a duck farm? Well, there's a woman who's raising exotic birds on the North Fork.
Is she still doing that?
Yeah,
Who?
yeah.
I'm not familiar.
Oh,
you're thinking of the quail lady.
yeah, the quail lady.
Feisty Acres.
Yeah,
They're-
Feisty
they're-
Acres.
they're-
Yeah.
Something happened. They're done. They moved upstate. There we go.
Oh.
Promise somebody over here, and I'm making my way back, so we'll work on it.
Good morning, and thank you. We love all your restaurants, and I assume that you have many years left in the kitchen and management, et cetera. What are you doing in terms of the pipeline of upcoming local chefs and restaurants? It seems that many, if not all, of the new restaurants, I hate to refer to this as the mallification of restaurants, but they're branches of restaurants that are mostly in Manhattan or other parts of the country. I don't even know, do they purchase local produce? And do you have a program for new and upcoming local chefs and farmers, et cetera?
I think there's so there's been the past 10 years, let's say, the advent of the pop-up concept where someone's here for a year and then they're not here anymore. I mean, a place that sort of is an example of a new spot that came from the city, that's really embraced it out here and is dealing with local people and has that vibe, as Donna at
Well, Il
at
Buco,
El Buco, yeah, for sure. El Buco.
and maybe St. Ambrose. But you know, you've always had New York
Pretty
City.
sure St. Ambrose has strawberries on the menu in the middle of January, but I'm just saying.
But I mean, going back,
funny.
you had Martell's, which was a city restaurant in Amagansett. Does anyone remember that? I don't know. You know, they have their supply chains and whatnot. But I think Il Buco is a good example of what can happen. The question?
Sorry, guys. Let's see. There's a gentleman over here that I promised the next question to.
Hey, can you hear me? So you guys aren't serving lunch today? Is that with the use of GLP-1s and Ozempic and the like, are you guys seeing people ordering less food or not finishing portions as much? Is that an issue for you guys at all?
Do you want it? No, I think people are still eating a meal, appetizer, entree, and hopefully dessert.
I mean, I think people's eating habits have definitely lightened up. And my general manager, Lori Tomasino, who happens to be here, constantly points it out to us, which is a good thing because I'm a big, fat Italian guy that likes to eat. And I like to put food on the plate, and I like to feed people, and I hate the fact when people leave a restaurant hungry and go home after paying a lot of money. You know, it's one of the things that bothers me. But yeah, I definitely think people's eating habits have changed a lot. Definitely.
In terms of sharing and that kind of thing?
Yeah, you won't see as many appetizer, entree, desserts. You know, you'll see share appetizers or share entrees. Yeah, you definitely, you know, and it could also be price driven as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
well,
so it's
you take a restaurant like 1770 where dinner is prefix and you're forced into 3 courses. 2 courses.
2 courses. It's an appetizer and an entree, and I guess that is probably why everybody has an appetizer and an entree, and then hopefully dessert because it's 2 courses. But yeah, so if we weren't doing a pre-fee, people would certainly probably be sharing appetizers or sharing an entree, and it is driven by, you know, trends in health and also probably price.
I just saw something that indicated, it was in a publication that indicated that fewer people are taking home doggy bags. Have you seen that? And if so,
I
how
missed
do you
that article. I didn't see it. And what's the logic behind that?
It was just an observation.
Yeah, I still have doggy bags.
I mean, I think all this goes to, I think there's way too much waste in our business.
Well, why do you serve such big portions then?
Because you want you to have value.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want people to go hungry. You mean me specifically? Do you think we? Because I've heard that. No, I've heard people say that our portions are too big.
Oh, I mean, I can't finish a restaurant portion of pasta. There's no way. I can't finish an 8-ounce burger. Please. But maybe a lot of people here can.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it's again, there's a tension between wanting to give people a value for you're charging a certain amount of money, and you want people to feel like they have a value. And we're all Jewish grandmothers in this business. We don't want our people to leave hungry. You know, it's a shanda. But that said, it's a tension between that and having food go in the garbage. I'm working on it.
But I've started to see in steakhouses where your strip loin or ribeye is available in various sizes at different prices. Like you can get an 8-ounce or a 12-ounce or a 16-ounce or whatever. I think that's a good thing. Or more questions?
Thomas, the next question to the gentleman back here.
Joe, I like your comment about the bluefish. And I remember reading an article several years ago of a very prominent chef who was challenged to sell it on his menu in his very popular restaurant. He decided to try it. And after 2 or 3 days, nobody bought it. But he got the idea to call it cobalt snapper. since it's all marketing. And I mean, it's a blue fish, and cobalt is blue.
Well, Small bluefish are called
And-
snappers.
And if there's any solace about the red snapper issue, I did see pink tilapia in a market in Riverhead.
I'm sorry about that.
I have one more question back here, and then I'm going to move forward.
Hi, I have a question. It's not food related, but I was wondering if any of you have experienced problems with small children in restaurants. Because for years,
Never.
out here, I've noticed for years out here. I was in Zen maybe 15 years ago in Sag Harbor, and the manager asked the couple with the two unruly children to leave.
It is easier now with most of the children will have an iPad, or, we used to give them the crayons and drawing things, and then it was wiki sticks, and now most people come with their children and they have something to look at.
There's
Although
the-
I did have 2 children the other day reading books. They had their little portable light on it, and they were reading books, and I was just very impressed with that.
There's the occasional phenomenon where the family comes in and they decide that it's actually our job to babysit the kids while they're.
That's not good.
But again, that's kids are part of our brand. We often bring the kids into the kitchen. We do a thing. We put them in the walk-in and turn the light off, and it's a whole shtick.
Jason.
Ready to throw them in the fryer. It goes off great.
Give them an
Talk about
espresso.
Children in restaurants. Many, many years ago when I managed Nick and Tony's with my husband, before Mark Smith came, and with Bonnie Munchin, the legend, Steve Wheely, may he rest in peace, always came in with his son for dinner. And Bob Berteni, another very, very good customer who always came in with his children. And they were very, very well behaved. When Joe and I had children, I said, "What's your secret?" My secret, Cindy, is to take them out. Introduce them to food. Start with breakfast. 30 minutes. Go to lunch. Go to dinner. Don't order apps or entree or dessert. Eat and go home. Get them used to the setting. Don't bring computers. Let them interact with people, and you will have good children in restaurants. And it worked. So I thank Steve for that advice.
And Ned, Steve's son Ned, ended up working for us at both the restaurant in the city and out here. So it's closed the circle. What a great kid.
I've promised the next question to this lady here.
There was a story not long ago in the Southampton Press about how liquor stores and wine stores their bottom line was suffering because of the soberish movement. Are you seeing something similar in restaurants, and are you doing anything to accommodate people who are looking for more non-alcoholic drinks?
Mocktails and non-alcoholic beverages. Yeah, we have the Spring in a Bottle from Wolfer, which is that alcohol-removed sparkling wine, and there are all sorts of packaged things you can buy. Yeah, phony Negronis.
Yeah. No, that whole segment has improved exponentially over the past 5 years, I would say, from almost zero to any number of really drinkable, once you have it with food, drinkable quaffs that are non-alcoholic. And I think there are a lot of factors generating the interest. It's not just the so-called wellness fad, but it's also the awareness that you could get stopped on the road on the way home. And people don't want to deal with that and the danger and, on and on and on. There are a million reasons.
I think cannabis actually plays a part in it as well. A lot of young kids now don't drink anymore.
Right.
They all smoke a joint and, kind of hang out, and I think people do that with restaurants too. They might smoke before going to a restaurant, and just kind of chilling through their meal and eating and not spending money on the cocktails.
I think actually the police presence out here in general and the amount of driving that needs to be done is another challenge we have to deal with. There isn't. Restaurant we close earlier than we should be than we should, and people are cutting themselves off after a drink or two, not because they don't want to drink, because they just are worried about the cops. The Uber presence out here is kind of terrible, and we all complain about it, but I think it's probably helped us a little bit on that level.
You brought up an interesting point that we haven't covered, and I think it may be a factor that has come to prominence since COVID. What about the hours that people want to dine. How has that affected your bottom line? How has it affected the way you organize your kitchen, your staff, your reservations? Can we talk a little about that?
I haven't really necessarily see the bottom line. I just see a shift in the reservations. You know, before COVID, you know, you couldn't get people in a restaurant before 7 o'clock. You know, we'd have that, you know, 5:30 to 7, and you'd have that, how do we fill the restaurant? You'd try early prefix in the summer, and people were staying until 11:30. COVID hit, now people 5 o'clock, you know, you're full seating. By 9:30, you're done.
And in terms of reservations, tell me about the digital reservation systems that you are now using. Now, I have a friend who refuses to use Resi, Open Table, 7 Rooms, or Talk, or any of those. And yet, so many restaurants don't have a phone number where you can reach them, and you're forced into those systems. How do they affect you? How do they affect your reservations? How do they affect your ability? Because I know that restaurants routinely block out prime time from those systems so that they can control who comes in and when. But because that's certainly a new factor over the past, 10 years, less?
Yeah, well, it's actually great because you don't have to have so many people on phones 24 hours a day. Most people are making them online these days, but I know there are still people making phone calls. We do both. We are open at 9 a.m. taking your phone call. But yes, there might be some limited tables, you know, that we can control what is available to the general public, knowing that maybe a very regular customer, and it's okay to take care of regular customers, might call you at the last minute and needs a table. You can't keep too many of those on hold, but you may be able to keep 1 or 2.
I mean, it's a lot, I think it's a lot more small town out here than it is in the city. I mean, a lot of our customers have Eric's cell phone. I mean, people want to talk to a person.
They text us.
And yeah, I mean, we do it the other way around. We block, we make allotments and block things that Resi can't take, just so we can take them in person, take them when they have to actually want to speak to a real person. So, but I know in the city, there's that. There's no reservation line. You just see it's Resi or not, or nothing.
Any more questions? Here, yes, we have a lot more.
I have several different types of
Now,
questions.
Toni, you promised some softballs. You promised.
What?
You promised some softball questions. Don't make it too probing.
Long Island Restaurant Week is generally twice a year. Do you think it should be more than that? That's number one. Number two, in order to promote Long Island wines, certainly now with what's happening, do you think that there should be huge public relations campaigns by all of these? Because Long Island Wine is now its own brand. I mean, Long Island Wine. East End Hospice has their ticket books every year. And I don't know if you all know what it is, but you buy it for $100, and a lot of restaurants are on there, and it's almost all the time 2 for 1 at certain times. You know, there are certain exclusions. But do you think more restaurants should be part of that? Because it does benefit East End Hospice. So.
Absolutely. Charity, helping out charities is always, you know, on our minds to do. I haven't seen the East End Hospice one in a long time. I didn't even know they still do it. Yeah, I remember those booklets. I remember them. Yeah. I haven't seen that in a long time. Yeah, well, I'm happy to know that that's still good. Let me know.
You know, and I think the question on Long Island Restaurant Week, I mean, we do Long Island Restaurant Week year-round. You know, we're running prefix. We've always argued with Word Hampton about that whole concept, is we're doing prefixes anyway. Why do we need Long Island Restaurant Week? When they used to do Hamptons Restaurant Week, it was beneficial to us because people would travel to us. I feel like Long Island Restaurant Week has just been diluted, you know, so it doesn't give people a reason to kind of travel to experience your restaurant where they could stay right in their own backyard and get the same deal.
Also, you don't want to get a 3 restaurant people to start riffing about Restaurant Week in general. I mean, it'll can go down all kinds of crazy rabbit holes. But like Joe said, this is exactly what we always say to said to Steve when he was with us. We do it 5 days out of the week anyway for 10 months out of the year. The hospice thing, I'm glad. Well, I saw Toni. You showed me that we're still in there. I'm glad that we are. I think they need. I wasn't even aware that it was still a thing. I think they need to do a little bit better job with outreach. I'm going to turn it back on them.
I have another. I believe you. I have another question back here. If Tony's okay,
We're good.
So on the opposite side of eating less and not ordering appetizers, I've been lucky enough to sit on the patio of 1770 House and do 7 or even 8 courses at a dinner one night. And I'm just wondering if there's still room for those types of tasting menus, 4 or 5 courses based around specific foods, or, it sounds like people are coming in at 5 o'clock and wanting to get out quick, and people aren't looking for experiences as much as just kind of getting in and out and having comfort food. But I wonder if there's still room for those bigger tasting menus.
There's definitely room for them. We'd like to allot time for them, but yeah, you aren't the only one, Gavin. Other people are having a dining experience. It's everything. It's some people grabbing a bite before they go to a movie. It's people that want to have an experience with the sommelier and the chef. It's all of that. But yes, there's definitely room for that still.
I think you have restaurants periodically. I know Nick and Tony's does it, and I don't know about 1770, but Almond, special dinners where you can charge several $100s. You have a winemaker there, and the chef has crafted a menu that may be 4 courses or more to accommodate particular wines you're showcasing, and people who have that gastronomic interest will show up.
Absolutely. We've done one with the winemaker from Opus One, and that was a huge one. You can charge a lot of money. We do have Roman Roth coming to from Wolfer for a dinner on May 1st. So if you're interested, please come.
I have another question back here.
Hi, I'm curious. When that fishmonger shows up at your door with a piece of monkfish and you decide what else you're going to put on that plate, how do you price that dish?
Well, you have to do a yield test. By now, we know what kind of yield we're getting from most fish. A striped bass, you might only get 40% worth of, on a 10-pound fish, you might only get 4 pounds worth of fillet. So, there's some quick kitchen math that we kind of do on all these things, take into consideration, the price of butter and eggs and olive oil. And, we do some quick math, and then we mark up accordingly. There's definitely a process to it. Now we have access to, costing programs. So when we're doing menus, we test out the dishes, and we actually have ingredients that are in there, and we could actually just write a recipe, and it'll give you a cost of goods, and you can put in your price, and it'll tell you your percentage on it. So, there's definitely some kitchen math that we do on that.
How much do you charge today, and what is the number of ounces of a burger, and how does that compare with, say, 5 years ago?
Well, our burgers at Rowdy, I think, started at 8 ounces, and now they're down to 6 ounces. And not just because of cost, but, just the way people are eating, So that's definitely changed,
What about the price? The same?
It's more, but the price of beef we were paying $1.99 back then. Now you're paying upwards of six and change for, that quality prime. Now we're doing special blends. It might be a short rib blend. We might be using prime. It's not just your 80-20 chuck that you used to get from Cromer's anymore.
Just generally the things that are a little bit cheaper on the menu. You don't need to get as much. You can get a little bit of a higher percentage on. So a burger, your food cost on a burger is actually going to be maybe 15%. But because the burger is is a cheaper item, it's only after the percentages and after everything else, you're only bringing maybe $10 or $12 to the bottom line. For a more expensive thing, like let's say a piece of monkfish, you want that percentage to be, that percentage is going to be more like maybe 30, 35, 40% food costs. But because the whole thing costs $40, you're ending up, well, do the math, you're ending up bringing more like $22 or $23 to the bottom line. So there's a shifting scale. The cheaper things usually are going to be a little bit more of a ripoff. The expensive things are actually going to be the ones that you're actually getting a better deal on. Just to talk a little inside baseball and make me feel like a schmuck.
And I have another question over here.
Hi, first I want to thank you all. It was excellent presentation today. Do you think if the railroad gave us a bit more of a flexible schedule, it would help with the housing issue, transportation, and being able to get staff out here so we all have better access to staff? I mean, is there any way that we as a group of people in the business can force the railroad to add to their schedule? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. Gavin?
John, you're you're also obviously very handsome, but you're also very intelligent, obviously. That is, the lack of public transportation out here, which we haven't talked about, is such a key thing. And like I mentioned the subway in the city, where you live in 85 bars, you can get to anywhere in the city in an hour or so, and you have access to that labor pool, but also that clientele, right? There is so little public transportation out here. It would be amazing if you want to work on that, John.
We have another question right up here.
Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. AI, is there any way that helps? Pricing, food?
I haven't even dipped into that yet. ChatGPT to write a letter for me is as far as I've gotten, and it's amazing. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to affect our industry and all the other industries out here. So I don't really know much about it.
I have to say, in my experience, and I'm doing a lot of coverage of new restaurants, and I look at a lot of menus, and lately I think maybe 30% of the menus that I look at and I say, this was drawn up by AI, because tuna tartare, Caesar salad, steak, a burger, a side dish of some kind of potato, bronzino, and for dessert, you've got a creme brulee. I mean, you don't have to think about crafting a menu. And there's a pasta that's cacio e pepe. And you don't have to think about what to draw up on a menu. And you do this because it's routine and what everybody wants. And to me, I think that those menus are done up by AI. I don't know. How do you feel? Do you have to have those things on your menu?
I think those items that you just named are kind of driven by the consumers. It's what people want. Every once in a while we'll throw something crazy on the menu over at
Like
Toni's. Rabbit or sweetbreads or, venison.
It's okay.
I quail, pheasant. I call those sleepers.
Yeah.
I call those sleepers because I put them on the menu because those are things that I like to eat. And
That's what I would go
and
for.
I know my chefs like to cook them. And I know there's some people in the community that will come in and enjoy it when they do. But they are definitely sleepers on the menu. And you keep them on for a short period of time, and then you just move them off. But you have to keep those staples on the menu, the burger, the steak, the side of potatoes, Caesar salad.
What?
I think if we took the Caesar
salad
salad off the menu at Nick and Tony's, there'd be an uproar. I mean, it's crazy how many of those we sell.
I mean, we kind of, speaking specifically of the Caesar salad thing, about, 16 years ago, the girls at Amber Waves said, I have a lot of Brussels sprouts. What can you do with all these Brussels sprouts? And we're like, well, people don't really love Brussels sprouts. So that's changed recently. I think I have something to do with that. But anyway, we have all these Brussels sprouts, and people really like Caesar salads. So we made a Brussels sprout Caesar salad. It ended up being a thing that we can't really take off the menu.
Some cooked and some raw.
Right, exactly.
It's a wonderful salad.
And it was a way to kind of sneak. It's kind of like, making the kid have his green vegetables by putting a lot of cheese on top of it or something. So I think there are ways to kind of play with people's expectations, play with people's habits, and also kind of move them in the direction you want them to go.
We're about to wrap this up, but do we have any more questions? We have time for one more.
Long Island, there is the Long Island Wine Trail. And I think Cornell Extension has something to do with it. Yeah, but there is the Long Island Wine Trail, which is the
Yeah.
thing. You see the signs. That's all I got,
Well,
Tony.
I mean, and people come out to discover the wines. There's also, New York State just started a seafood
Food
trail.
trail. Yeah, we're doing that. Are you doing that, Joe? Yeah. Yep.
Sorry. I think we're going to have to cap it after this one, but.
I want to know more about the seafood trail.
Hi. Just want to do a shout out to Carol. She's a great boss at 1770
Holly's
House.
here.
I have seen both sides of the restaurant industry out here, and so I'm so curious because y'all have been doing it for so long, and I've seen the other side of complaints about prices, complaints about menus, complaints about resi, complaints about this, complaints about that. What keeps you going, and how do you keep the joy in doing all this, despite it being, from my perspective, an impossible thing that you all are doing? How do you keep doing it?
We're masochists. We like pain.
Are we people pleasers? We do like to make people happy. You're in our home. We are taking care of you for 2 hours, maybe less, but we are taking care of you. And when we delight people, it's the best feeling. We know sometimes people come in grumpy, and we tell the staff, let's turn them around, And so the waiter said, what about us? What if we come in grumpy? I said, well, we're a team, and then we're going to lift you up, too. We're going to lift you up. We're going to lift the people up. We just do our best, and it just feels so good. I had somebody come in recently. She said, my husband and I used to come in here all the time. My husband died a couple of years ago. I haven't been back since. She was sitting in the parlor. She said, I just came 2 months ago to sit in the parlor, and I just sat there for over an hour, and everybody came over to me and was so nice to me, either offered me water or just said hello. I'm so happy to be back here. It's those feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier that, after 25 years, we've seen generations come through our place, and we've seen people born, people pass, and like I said before, we're all kind of Jewish grandmothers that just want to leave, have people come in hungry and leave completely sated, and who knows what they're bringing in. I hear Eric talk to the staff a lot, like you just mentioned. People, yeah, they're gonna come in, they're gonna be grumpy. Yeah, maybe they have no right to be grumpy, and you're the one who's on your feet for 12 hours. But they're here so we can turn them around, so we can make them happy. That's why they're here.
You can't be in this business if you don't want to deal with people in a loving way. I mean, and in some places it shows that they don't care. And those are the places that I'm amazed that people go back to. But by and large, you need to be welcoming, you need to be caring. And I know it's harder and harder because people are allergic to everything now, and they want special this and special that.
Talk about that.
It's a challenge.
I was going to say that Will Guidara, his book Unreasonable Hospitality is such an inspiration, and one of the things he says there is that service is black and white, but hospitality is color. And I have that in my head every day now.
I'm still mad at him about EMP summer, but whatever, I'll get over it.
Oh.
Well, I want to thank, if there are no more questions from the audience. I want to thank the panel for taking time. I want to thank you all for coming, and keep going out to eat.